We were supposed to have a 10-minute reportage after the breakout sessions, but everyone was so engaged that we didn't sort of make it to that. So what we'll do this afternoon, we'll have our two speakers and then another breakout session, but we'll try to stop about 10 minutes before 3, something like that, and just have some comments from the tables, and then maybe just some general conversation. Our next speaker is Janice Ashworth, and Janice is the section manager for the private building section of the Climate Change and Resiliency Unit at the City of Ottawa, and she's worked there for 4 years. With the city, Janice was a co-author of the Energy Evolution Strategy and now manages the development and implementation of Better Homes and Better Buildings programs. She has a background in sustainable energy businesses, social financing, and community organization. Prior to joining the city, she managed the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative and Co-Energy Co-op for 9 years, where she developed local solar energy and energy conservation projects. And with that, I'd like to invite Janice up to the podium.
Thanks. Glad to be here. So I'm going to speak to you today about the City of Ottawa's programs for private buildings, mostly on the commercial side today, although my team also manages the residential programs as well. I'm also here with my colleague Marie Hanchett, who's just over there in the room, and she's a great resource around a lot of our capacity building and education programs. So feel free to ask either of us questions if you have any after my presentation. We're going to talk about how the city is accelerating retrofits of existing industrial, commercial, institutional, and multi-unit residential buildings. So from council direction, we've received direction in 2020 to, under our climate change master plan. That was when council set their greenhouse gas reduction targets and some pretty high level priorities regarding mitigation and adaptation objectives of the city. In October of that year, 2020, the Energy Evolution Strategy was approved by Council, and that really got into answering the question of what would it take to meet Council's stated targets. So on the mitigation side exclusively, looking both at corporate or municipal assets and emissions reductions, as well as community emissions reductions. What is it going to take for all of us to decarbonize across the city? As part of that strategy, there was included what was called then the Commercial Building Retrofit Accelerator Program. We've rebranded that to call it Better Buildings. And so in 2021, Council approved the Better Buildings Ottawa strategy. And I'm going to go into some details around that, but it really looks at buildings under Part 3 of the Building Code with an exclusion of public buildings. So municipal buildings are dealt with under a separate strategy. And we figure the feds have their bases covered. We're not dealing with their buildings, and the province as well. So the municipality is looking at programs and policies to help private building owners decarbonize across the city. How are we doing with regards to meeting our emissions targets? Not very well, as you can tell. Emissions have come down a bit. The first big drop there was thanks to the phase out of coal in the Ontario electricity grid. The second big drop was thanks to COVID. Everything else has effectively been business as usual or pretty static. And you can see we need to rapidly decarbonize over the next 20 years, 17 years in order to meet our targets. The City of Ottawa does have a net zero target by 2050. However, it's 96% of the way there by 2040. So really it's a 2040 target to effectively decarbonize, and we're not on trajectory for that. These numbers show the last iteration of our inventory, which was 2021. You can assume 2022 bounced back up a little bit as a post-pandemic response. And I suspect 2023 is on that same trajectory. So we have a long ways to go with regards to reductions. So our energy evolution strategy mapped out where could we see reductions, and what would those measures be that would get us there. So this is a high level of where those reductions are going to come from. The biggest chunks, of course, are the transportation sector. That's effectively reducing trips using sustainable modes of transportation and public transit, and electrifying every vehicle. So that's the red or the orange sort of chunk there of transportation. Existing buildings is where we're going to focus today. So that's the next biggest chunk. And that's all of our buildings, right? It's getting natural gas out of every building, as I'm sure you all know. Some of the other ones there, electricity, so scrubbing out the gas from the electricity grid. Waste and renewable natural gas, that's effectively capturing methane at our landfills and solid waste and sewage waste facilities, and using that as a replacement for natural gas in the gas distribution network. And then new buildings, this is our high performance development standard, is making sure we go faster than building code with our new building construction. So that's what the City of Ottawa has sort of broken down as where we're going to see emissions reductions. When we look specifically at the Part 3 building sector, what do we need to see in order to achieve those wedge reductions? So when we look at small ICI and MURBs, we're needing to see 60% thermal reductions, followed by 30% electrical savings before fuel switching. No big deal, right? Retrofits, yeah, Marie's got this. And we need to have about a third of them done by 2030 and all of them done by 2040. Dan, you're on it? Great. And then when it comes to large ICI buildings and MURBs, it's 50% energy savings across the board. So a little bit more fluid on how that's achieved, but still a third of them done by 2030, all of them done by 2040. On top of that, we're going to install about 80,000 heat pumps in that time frame. We're in the Part 3 sector alone. There's another 500,000 heat pumps for the residential sector, Part 9 sector. And we're going to see electric hot water tanks installed, and a whole bunch of solar PV that's also not even on this chart. So we need to rapidly increase our rate of retrofits, which brings up the workforce challenge, quadrupling or multiplying it by 5x from what we're currently seeing. So, get folks into the trades and engineering and architecture in the short term. Looking specifically at our Better Buildings Ottawa strategy, it's broken down into 5 steps. We've really tackled step 1 and 2 so far, but I'm going to speak about the other ones so you know kind of where we're going. So number 1, benchmarking and disclosure. We need to know where we're starting and have transparency on that data. Number 2, marketing, education, and training. So that's capacity building, workforce development, making sure we're all aware of how we get to that net zero outcome. Number 3 is then some financial tools to help with incentives, financing tools, loan programs, that kind of thing, and general coordination. So we're getting into developing those pieces now. And then 4 is regulations. So that's emission standards for every building. Municipalities do have that authority. We're seeing it happening across the US. Vancouver and Toronto are going that way. Montreal's signaling. We have signaled it's coming. We need to prepare for it. So we're doing some studies now on what would those thresholds be and when would they come into effect. And then number 5 is really sort of throughout all of the rest, which is engaging with senior levels of government to align things like building code, retrofit codes, and natural gas regulations and that kind of thing that fall outside of the municipal authority. So what have we done to date under those 5 headings? Number 1, under benchmarking, we have a benchmarking and auditing program. We've had about 350 buildings benchmark through ESPM, Energy Star Portfolio Manager. This is on a voluntary level currently. Many of them are required under the provincial program to benchmark. So sending it to the City of Ottawa is just as simple as an extra check mark of approvals. But for us, they show up on a disclosure map. So we're disclosing those buildings at the building level, whereas in the provincial program, it's only in aggregate. So we're thinking that level of transparency is needed to sort of shift market understandings. We've also done some thermal scans of two office neighborhoods or districts. We did some thermal scanning of downtown and of Canada North just in November. We're about to release the reports in the next month or so that show us at a high level, how are the building envelopes doing and where are the opportunities that arise. We've also done some work on marketing, education, and training. We've partnered on the Better Buildings Breakfast series with James McNeil and been part of developing the scope for those. I'm going to show you some of our low carbon heating research that we've got on our website that's available for the public. We're about to release our retrofit roadmaps. I'll give you a glimpse of what those look like today. Those are archetypal based roadmaps of what will it take for different building archetypes to achieve the targets that we've set. We're going to launch a schedule of net zero training courses this spring. And we've got some virtual audits coming on 5,000 commercial buildings with our collaborators at the Ottawa Climate Action Fund using a tool called Odette. Those virtual audits will be available for 5,000 commercial buildings sometime in the next 6 months or so. When it comes to the kind of financial tools under number 3, we're in the development of a commercial loan program similar to our Better Homes Ottawa loan program, which is a PACE program, if that's something you're familiar with. We're working on some nuances around that and collaborations in particular with the aggregators who have arrangements with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, because right now they've got the most competitive debt on the market, and we want to bring that to Ottawa. So we're working closely with those aggregators to try to extend their services across the Ottawa market and really kind of launch, de-risk that and launch their services in Ottawa. And we're looking at some incentives and tax rebates that we might be able to finance through tax value increase of higher value buildings. I was discouraged to hear Ross say this morning that he's not able to get much increased rent from his lead platinum buildings. Just on that the market's not really recognizing that. Our studies are showing a little bit different, but love to chat with you a bit more about where your numbers are coming from. And then number 4, of course, is the emissions standards. So we're just doing some studies right now on what that could look like, but you can look around and see that those are typically coming into effect in as early as 2025 in some jurisdictions in Canada. So we're hoping to kind of catch up and have that signal to the market as soon as possible so people can be prepared to meet those standards. And then ongoing discussions with senior government. The Mayor of Ottawa in January of last year, Mayor Watson, did send a bunch of letters to different ministries at the federal and provincial levels, making requests for authorities and supports and changes. So if you want to see what was sent, you can check that out on the city's website. We're hoping that this current mayor will send a reiteration of those requests under the new council. So that's something we're also working on. So specifically our benchmarking and auditing program, I mentioned we had about 350 buildings participate. It is following the same process for EWRB. So we're trying to encourage compliance with the provincial program while also participating in the municipal program and creating that culture of transparency across Ottawa. That's our objective with this program. Participants are sort of sweetener. Why should they participate? Because it's a good thing to do, but also because we give them these free insights, energy reduction reports or insights reports, comparing where they're at to other buildings of similar archetypes. We also offer some free courses, so that schedule of net zero courses that we'll be offering this spring will be available to participants in our benchmarking program. Those courses will include, so far we've got plans for making the case for decarbonization, as well as energy efficiency for building operators, both offered through CIET. Marie knows all about that. You can ask her about those courses. And we've also been offering 20% off thermal scans, more detailed thermal scans of buildings. So we've made an arrangement with a company in Toronto called Keytech, and they will do sort of drone imagery, thermal imagery, and that can be useful for looking at building envelope opportunities in particular. So they've offered 20% off for all of our participants in our benchmarking program. In terms of learning how to participate, there's a couple of opportunities coming up. Hydro Ottawa is hosting a webinar on Thursday of this week. And the Better Buildings Breakfast on March 21st will also look at benchmarking and the benefits and opportunities and processes for doing that. Or you can contact us by email. I've got some contact sheets at the end of our slide at the end of the presentation. That map isn't really showing up very well, but that gives you a sense of what it looks like on our website, how the buildings appear. And then of course you can click on each one of them and get a report card for that building, get a sense of where it falls in the spectrum of buildings of its similar archetype, and the data that's available. We've been asking for data as far back as 2019 to get a pre-pandemic benchmark, but we've got 2019, 2020, and 2021 data so far, and we're just about to launch the next year of 2022 data. So we're hoping to collect data from just last year. The thermal scanning, we did this as a street view thermal scan, just from the public domain. So like, as I mentioned, we did this for a couple of neighborhoods. downtown district and Canada North. We had basically a Google car with a thermal camera on the roof drive around, as well as a drone, take some pictures from the air, and just get a sense of a couple of the facades of the building and get a sense of where we're at with regards to building envelopes, because so far all of our analyses have come from just desktop analysis and no real data collection from the building stock. And so this will help us figure out what is the spectrum of building envelopes. What is the difference in two different age classes of building types? Are they significantly different or one from the other? And then we're also testing how an image drives action. How does an image drive change or drive motivation to engage? So that's another part of our hypothesis here is how effective is it to give a snapshot of a building to that building owner to start some wheels turning, right? So those will be coming out pretty soon. Yeah, if you're captured in those districts, you're welcome to get in touch with us and we'll make sure that the report comes to you directly. When it comes to sort of capacity building, we've done some work on net zero or low carbon heating options and helping building owners think through what those options are. So this map is on our website as well. It looks at potential for open loop geothermal resources. So it's really an analysis of the geological layers layered on top with the provincial well database to find where is there good opportunities or potential opportunities for open loop geothermal. The blue is effectively higher potential, and red and orange are lower potential. Red being the worst, orange next. A light blue is likely, and darker blue is probable. So you can check out your address on this map if you're thinking about geothermal as an option. I know there's a lot of other challenges with regards to open loop from a permitting and environmental approvals point of view, but it is the most cost-effective form of geothermal. And so, this is trying to give a sense of where does it make sense to do a test well or not. Ottawa's got a lot of really interesting geology that's got a lot of folds that are right next to each other. So don't take this as gospel. We didn't go and drill and create this map. We're just taking the well databases that exist already, but it is sort of a statistical analysis of what's there. And you can see kind of on the east end, that's pretty unlikely you're going to get, because of the Carlsbad Formation, fairly unlikely you're going to get a good aquifer there. Whereas, west of sort of the Rideau River, I suppose, is higher likelihood. Another map that we put on our website to help think through some low carbon options is this wet potential. So wastewater energy transfer. So the city has wastewater running through large pipes underground. It's a unique situation in Ottawa where we have only one wastewater treatment facility way at the east end of town. So we have some pretty large trunk sewers that run under good swaths of downtown and kind of, under Hunt Club Road kind of thing, I think is where that lower green one is. And so we were looking at flow rates and what is the threshold for to justify a wastewater system. And we found that basically where the green lines are, those pipes have enough flow and diameter that there could be potential for a wastewater energy transfer technology in those neighborhoods. Of course, if you put one on that pipe, it then sort of has a bit of a radial effect of reducing the capacity. It's kind of a first come, first serve sort of basis, but this is giving a sense. The red dots are pumping stations. And the pumping stations are particularly interesting because they're already wet wells. They've already done the civil work of drilling down, right? So we think there could be some potential for saving energy or saving money for an installation of a wastewater energy system. So that's also on the city's website. We welcome questions or queries. There's a sewers email if you want to get the exact flow numbers for any particular location. But we're trying to make it sort of a starting point for developers to think through options that are available. If you have questions as we go along, please just put your hand up. I know I'm throwing a lot of different topics here on the table. But so then our retrofit roadmaps. This is just a snapshot. We're not quite happy with them yet, so we haven't published them yet, but they'll be coming in the next couple of weeks. But what we've done is for 7 different archetypes of commercial buildings, we've worked with WSP to put together kind of waterfall graphs of what is it going to take to get to the deep reductions that the city has included in its energy evolution strategy, and what are the costing, what's the high level costing estimates for that and the payback potential. So You can see here, there's, there's kind of waterfall scenarios for, this is, for an example, an older multi-unit res building built in the 50s to 70s, approximately 7,600 square meters. This is what a building by retrofit pathway would look like for that type of building. And yeah, again, you can see it has the carbon savings as well as the cost savings in these archetypes, and a list of what measures would be included. So what is the typical building looking like? What would it require for that deep reduction outcome? I'm not going to go through this in detail, but you can see kind of the building systems that are included: enclosure, HVAC, fuel switching, domestic hot water and heating, and then solar PV. So similar recipe to what we saw from Paul this morning, but we've just done this as a breakdown for the Ottawa area for different archetypes of buildings. What do we expect it to have to undergo in terms of measures to achieve those targets? So the question for the folks online is, how do we engage the building owners? And that's a great question, Dan. We are trying to develop our own CRM because we don't currently have a lot of contacts for all these building owners and operators. Folks who do have contacts are Hydro Ottawa, Enbridge, our own water utility, and our own tax billing utility. They have contacts for everyone. So how do we work through those networks, right? So that's where Marie and I and our team are working on. It's a communications problem as much as it's a technical problem, right? So I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, working with folks who have those direct contacts, right? Because right now, a lot of us are speaking to the early adopters. So a lot of us are speaking to the same crowd. We're trying to develop tools that are going to be attractive to those who are not in the room yet. So we think the B and C class office buildings and the condos, nobody's talking to them in a lot of detail yet. They're not really at the starting line yet. So they're the ones that we're particularly interested in trying to get under the tent. The city sees its role as not necessarily supporting the earliest folks across the finish line, but getting everyone at the starting line. That's kind of where we see our unique role is like, how do we make sure that the whole market is moving here? Steps 1 through 3 are carrots, right? Steps 4 is a stick. So we want to engage them in the carrots before we get to the sticks. We don't want their first integration or initiation to this conversation to be, here's fine, right? Like we'd rather it be, here's some tools to help you get to where we need you to go and set you up for success, right? So these are all sort of part of that conversation. Okay, there you go. So this QR code will send me or Marie an email saying, send me the archetypes when they're ready. Let me know about the benchmarking program and the webinars and tools coming up, and keep, stay part of the conversation. If you want to find information about what I've just posted, what I've said is, it's on the city's website. You can Google Better Buildings Ottawa, and it should take you to the appropriate ottawa.ca website. Also, the Energy Evolution page has a bunch of links on it to get to that site as well. If you've been to the Energy Evolution page, you can find the Better Buildings page from there. So, take questions. The question was, how are we crediting new buildings that don't exist in the reductions? So the business as planned line is that yellow line across the very top. And it is making assumptions around what is the current market trends, what are the current policy policy commitments, what is the growth expectation? Ottawa is expected to grow by 50% population in the next 30 years. So that inherently has a pressure upwards on emissions. So, and what are the growth in our urban area, right? So that's all part of the business as planned. So all of this is compared to business as planned. Yeah, we know there's going to be pressures on new housing, new commercial districts, new roads, new everything. So that's built into the business as planned. How do we do better than that? The question was, what is the wastewater energy transfer interest from the City of Ottawa, and what's the process for approving projects? So we have the first project going through the works right now is at Le Breton, the library parcel that Dreamers and Thea are working on. They will pave the way for a lot of others. They're figuring out, getting all the stakeholders within the city around the table, figuring out what the city's policies will be, what the permitting process will be, what the fees will be, and all that. That project should be first one through, and then we probably will replicate from there on. So,
I know
you know the project, yeah. So the principles there. It's going to be right like Booth and Albert, right next to the city's library, new library parcel. So the virtual audit process is, again, the city is actually just going to be promoting or sharing work that's being done by the Ottawa Climate Action Fund. So give them credit for this one. Company is called Odette. What they do is they populate their data lake with a whole bunch of different data sources that are available in the public domain. Things like, I think the unique feature that they're grabbing is the aerial imagery and the street view imagery from Google. And they're going to use that to figure out fenestration levels, as well as rooftop units, estimates of age of rooftop units, natural gas pipelines that they can see on the roof, and layer that on top of things like MPAC data with regards to square footage and age of buildings, usage patterns. They've got aggregate utility data in there. They don't have it at the address level, but they've got the aggregate. And then they've got a whole bunch of ASHRAE level 2 or 3 audits from other data sets that they've been able to secure. And using all of that, they then come up with these pathways of, they say, okay, it looks like your building is similar in age and type and usage pattern to this other building that we have an audit for. And so here's what we would expect your net zero pathway to be. They say it's better than an ASHRAE level 1, but not as good as level 2. We'll see. It hasn't been done much before. It's kind of in research and development phase, or it's in proof of concept phase. But it's going to be something that's available free of charge to every building, well, to 5,000 buildings across the city. So it's a start on these kind of mass market tools, mass data analysis tools, to help us start getting data to folks who don't otherwise have the funds or the wherewithal to get those pathway studies. And then from there will be an opportunity for building owners to upload more accurate data, utility data, maybe BAS data, asset age data, and that will calibrate the tool or the audit more closely. Again, all of this without needing a building or someone to go into the building, right? So it's all of this is just on desktop to save cost. So the theory is that all of that kind of ongoing calibration can be available free of charge for the building owner and paid for by well, in this case, the Ottawa Climate Action Fund. It might be supported by the city in the future. The utilities might see value in it. So the idea is give building owners some tools that they can have access to free of charge to overcome that hump of, do I invest in an audit, right? And where do I start? I don't have a ton to say on that other than the mechanism is the community improvement plan, which is the same one we use for brownfields, or the airport has a community improvement plan, Montreal Road. The idea being if the building or a property increases in value, the city receives more tax payment for that. The city can then choose to offer some of that increased future revenues back to that property owner as an incentive for doing that work, right? So if you improve a brownfield, the city receives quite a higher tax payment for it. So we will give back a portion of the tax revenue as incentive for doing that work. We're thinking there might be an opportunity to do that for high efficiency buildings too, which is why the valuation of the building is so important, because that's where the cash flow would come from to create that incentive up front, right? So we're doing some analysis right now with some real estate brokerages about that tax increase valuation that we could expect to then be able to justify whether or not an incentive program is possible.